Welcome. Today we'll be finding solutions to problems in our essay. Like with previous classes, the essays are standalone. You can watch the videos without having to start from the very first video I posted. So you could just open any one of these video and you understand what I'm explaining. I can guarantee that. Let's begin. The question is, you should spend about 40 minutes on this task. Global warming is one of the biggest threats humans face in the 21st century, and sea levels continue to rise at alarming rates. What problems are associated with this, and what are some possible solutions? You should write at least 250 words. Now, when given a question like this, what's the first thing you should do as someone who is interested in scoring a high band score in the IELTS test? Do you jump right in and start writing without a plan, or do you plan your essay? So, the first thing any student who wants to score good marks should do is to do the question analysis. Question analysis entails three things: identifying three words, and these words include the topic words, the micro topic words, and the instruction words. Why do you need to identify these words? Because they would help you to break down the prompt and ensure your answer stays relevant to the task requirements. By prompt here, I mean the question. And then by task requirements, I mean what the question expects of you. That's if you're to write an opinion essay, a discussion essay, a double questions essay, or an advantages and disadvantages essay, or even this essay we are treating today. So understanding the question and identifying these three classes of words is going to help you understand what is expected of you appropriately. Now let's understand what each of those elements of the question analysis entail, beginning with the topic words. The topic words are a word or a group of words that represents the broad subject of the question, more like a universal set of the discourse. You could refer to them as the theme of the question that you've been asked. And looking at this question on the right, I want you to pause this video and try to make a guess on what you think the topic word or the topic words should be for this question. After you do that, you play the video and find out if your answer was wrong or right. So, global warming, these are the topic words for this question. Why? Because they represent the broad subject or universal set of the discourse. Why did I pick global warming as a topic word? Because it's the central theme of this question. It's the result of, it's what causes the flooding, and the flooding causes problems. And they're asking us now for the problems that flooding causes and the possible solutions, what we think are possible solutions to this flooding. So everything still traces back to the global warming as as a root cause of the problem. So that's what qualifies global warming as the topic word for this essay. What are micro topic words? Now remember, this is the second class of words you're supposed to identify in your question analysis before you proceed into writing your essay. Why did I say you should do this? Because it's going to give you clarity regarding what is expected of you from the question. So micro topic words tell you exactly what part of the broad theme you should discuss in your essay. Let's read the essay together, the question, and as we do that, I'd like you to make a guess on what the micro topic word should be for this question, and then find out if your guess is wrong or right in the next as we proceed in this course. You should spend about 40 minutes on this task. Global warming is one of the biggest threats humans face in the 21st century, and sea levels continue to rise at alarming rates. What problems are associated with this, and what are some possible solutions? You should write at least 250 words. Now, these are the micro topic words: biggest, threats, 21st century, sea levels, continue, rise, and alarming rates. Why are these the micro topic words? Because they, they narrow down what you have to discuss about global warming as it relates to flood and how flooding causes problems as well, and the possible solutions to those problems that are caused by flooding. Now, you could ask again, why did I pick biggest? Biggest tells you that there are other problems that global warming causes, but there are other problems, but global warming has been classified as the biggest for this particular question. And so you need to take note of that, that you're going to be discussing it as a very serious issue in your essay. You're going to be discussing it as a threat, and you're going to be discussing it in relation to the 21st century. Continue classifies is qualifies as a micro topic word because it tells you that this is not something that has happened before and stopped. It's something that happened and is continuous, has kept on becoming worse as time passed. So All these words come together to give you more context as to what you are supposed to discuss about global warming and flooding. So that is what makes them qualify as microtopic words. Over to the so why do you need to identify the microtopic words? Because failing to identify these words leads to a broad discussion of the main topic, resulting in a loss of marks for task achievement. Discussing global warming too generally instead of addressing the problems and solutions it causes. So this is what would happen if you do not identify the microtopic words. Now, let's go back to the previous slide a bit, or let's just proceed. So, this is what will happen if you do not identify the microtopic words. You'll be tempted to discuss global warming too broadly, or even if you focus on discussing global warming, you might discuss something that is not related to what you've been asked to discuss. The question is discuss global warming and how it causes flooding and the problems that are associated with flooding and their solutions. So if you don't identify those micro topic words, you discuss something that is completely off the problems and solutions that are associated with flooding, which is caused by global warming. So the solution is by pinpointing micro topic words, you guarantee that all ideas are directly relevant to the specific question posed. That's what I just explained. Precision in analysis ensures your essay stays on track. In this case, the track is problems and solutions, as simple as that. So identifying for this essay, identifying your micro topic words helps you stay on track in identifying the problems and solutions that are associated with flooding, which is as a result of global warming. And finally, the instruction words. This is the third class of words that I suggest you identify in your question analysis before you dive into writing your essay proper. So they are pointers to the type of essay you need to write. And in this essay, we classify this essay as a problems and solution essay because of how the instruction words came. We've done opinion essays, we've done discussion essays, we've done advantages and disadvantages essays, and now we're doing the problems and solutions essays. Like like with others, we we concluded that this essay is a problems and solutions essay, or you could call it a causes and solutions essay. And why do we classify it as that? Because of the instruction words. What do the instruction words look like? These are the instruction words from the we picked from the question. And they read what problems are associated with this and what are some possible solutions. So based on this, it's clear for anybody to see that this is a problems and solutions essay because it requests that you discuss the problems and solutions associated with flooding, which is as a result of global warming. And we have the question on the right. You could read that again, read the instruction words which we have here, and the time requirement as well as the word requirement. So by identifying these three sets of words or classes of words, you are sure that you remain on track in writing an essay that is relevant to the question that you've been asked, an essay that will fetch you good marks in the IELTS test, an essay that will fetch you marks that you'll be able to use to travel and do whatever it is that you're traveling for. So on the left, we have the results of our question analysis, which include the topic words we identified, the micro topic words, and the instruction words. And on the right, we have the question. After doing your question analysis, the next thing you should do quickly is generating ideas. You've now understood the question properly, courtesy of the question analysis you did. With that understanding, you're going to make use of what we call the coffee shop method to generate ideas that are relevant to what you understood in the question. So this coffee shop method is otherwise known as the direct question method, and there are four steps to this. You first of all turn the question into a direct question. Imagine you're in a coffee shop or a restaurant with a friend. You're definitely not going to ask the question in the way it's asked in this essay. You're going to ask it in a more friendly way. You're going to make it simpler. So turn it into a direct question and ask yourself. After you do that, you answer it immediately without overthinking, because if you overthink, there's a tendency you're going to think up really complex ideas. And when you think up really complex ideas, you might not have the appropriate vocabulary to relay your thoughts adequately. So the simplest ideas you would think of are usually the best ideas you should write about, because they are the easiest ideas for you to explain, and they will also be the easiest ideas for the examiner or whoever is reading your essay to understand. And you don't want a situation whereby what you would write would be difficult for the examiner to understand. The whole purpose of the essay is to relate your thoughts to the examiner. The examiner should be able to understand your ideas easily. So when that is possible, you're going to score high band scores. So after you answer the question, ask yourself, why did I give that answer? Why is that answer sufficient to the question that was asked in the essay? Then after that, you give an example to support your reasons. So we're going to use these 4 steps, this coffee shop method, to generate ideas for this essay. Let's do that. So the question is on the left. You should spend about 40 minutes on this task. Global warming is one of the biggest threats humans face in the 21st century, and sea levels continue to rise at alarming rates. What problems are associated with this, and what are some possible solutions? You should write at least 250 words. When you turn this into a direct question, what is it going to read like? That is what we have here on the right. What problems does flooding as a result of global warming cause, and how can we solve them? As simple as that, instead of this highly academic and technical way of writing it, which we have here in the main question. This is a simple way to ask yourself the question to help you understand it better and help you think up easy ideas to write in the rest of your essay. So, what is an answer to this direct question? The problems flooding causes include home destruction and sicknesses, while the solutions to these 2 problems are dams and renewable energy. If you notice what I did here, I didn't write full sentences, and in the exams, I wouldn't even advise you write at this level. You should try to use shorthand as much as possible. Like instead of writing home destruction, you could just write HO, then give space and write DST dot. Then instead of this full and you just write the short form of and then instead of sicknesses, you just write SICK. So it's for you to understand. This is not going to be, you're not going to leave it like this. This is just your idea generation stage. You could scribble this down on a paper or type this on your screen. And as you proceed, you write your essay. After writing your essay, you come back to them and delete them. This is just a guide to help you write the rest of your essay. So you do not need to write it in full. As much as possible, use shorthand that you can understand because you're going to need these ideas you're generating here to write the rest of your essay. So flooding causes home destruction and sicknesses, and these 2 problems can be solved by construction of dams and the use of renewable energy. So, why are these? Why do I relate these problems to flooding, and how are they? Why do I classify them as problems? How are they problems? So that is where this why comes in. Floods destabilize people. When people are destabilized, it simply means their homes have been destroyed. So when people's homes get destroyed, they get destabilized and they become homeless. And when they are homeless, they'll definitely fall sick. So you've seen how I've been able to explain in simple terms how these 2 things are problems. Now, what are the solutions? Dams and renewable energy. Why are those solutions? Because dams stop flood and renewable energy, use of renewable energy stops global warming, which causes flooding. So you might say, when faced with this question, you might say, I don't know anything about global warming, or I don't know what the problems floods cause. As someone who is intending to travel, the IELTS does not expect that you would not know a thing about global warming, because global warming is a major driver of a very popular trend, which is renewable energy. And I'm sure in every area of the world, you must have heard of renewable energy, if not other types, at least solar energy. So the IELTS expects that for anybody who is intending to travel, you should at least know topics that are common as this, like global warming, topics that are a concern for the UN and the world. So you should know about global warming. Now, what's an example? Kogi flood and Europe's fresh air due to their use of renewable energy. You might not understand this now, and that is what I was trying to explain earlier, that what you'll be writing or scribbling down in your question analysis stage are things that you can easily understand. You do not necessarily need to write them out in full because you do not want to waste time doing that. Write them in the shorthand method you understand. You're going to be able to understand when you come to read off the ideas you generated and create your real essay. So an example of the problem is flood in Kogi State. I give that as an example. Remember, in the previous essays, there were some examples I fabricated, but this is an actual example. So I'm giving you variety of how you can structure your essays. And then Europe's fresh air due to their use of renewable energy. This is an example of how the use of renewable energy is a solution to the flooding issue. So we're going to see how We'll expand all of this in the main essays, in the main body paragraphs. Now we are done with the idea generation using the coffee shop method. We will proceed to structuring our essay. Any good essay should have four parts: the introduction, two main body paragraphs, and a conclusion. You do not need to do more than this because you do not have the time. If you try to do more than this, you will definitely not be able to explain in detail the points you've generated in your using the idea using the coffee shop method. So try as much as possible to limit your essay to four paragraphs, which include the introduction, the two main body paragraphs, and the conclusion. That way, you're sure that the few points you're going to give in the introduction will be completely elaborated in the two main body paragraphs, and you'll be able to conclude effectively in the conclusion. So these are the results. On the left, we have the results of our question analysis, which include identifying the topic word, the micro topic words, and the instruction word. And on the right, we have the synonyms of those words. So this is another reason why we had to identify them. Remember, I said in the beginning that you needed to identify them to help you have a more in-depth understanding of what the question is asking of you. Aside that, you also need to write them out this way so you could easily think up synonyms and make use of those synonyms in the essay. Why this is necessary? Because the IELTS is going to score you on lexical resource, which is how rich your vocabulary is. So if you just pick these words the way they've been given to you from the question and you plant them again everywhere in your essay, you're not going to get good scores on the lexical resource marking criteria. So you need to vary your words as much as possible, but take note that as much as you try to make use of synonyms, the synonyms should be appropriate synonyms. Appropriate in the sense that using the synonyms to replace the original keywords you found, which include the topic words, micro topic words, and the instruction words, would not change the original meaning of the essay or the question that was asked you. For instance, global warming in this case can appropriately be replaced by rising temperature, climate change, increasing air temperature. You see that in this context, it's not wrong to use any one of these three words as a replacement for global warming. Over to the micro topic words. Biggest can conveniently be replaced with major in this context. Remember how it was used. We said global warming is the biggest threat. It is comfortable and correct for you to say global warming is a major threat. That is an appropriate synonym. An appropriate synonym would be, let me cite this example. Let's say you have a son and you ask him to choose any one of three options, possibly a school flask. Maybe the son of yours is in primary school, and then he goes to choose the biggest flask. You would say he has choose the biggest flask. A sentence to explain that would be he choose the biggest flask. If you want to replace biggest in that context with major, that would be wrong because replacing biggest with major would read like he choose the major flask. So that's inappropriate. So you should be careful about synonyms and how you use them. For a fact that a word qualifies as a synonym for another word doesn't mean that it is going to appropriately fit into the context in which the original word was used. So you should be careful about using synonyms. Now, for 21st century, it can be comfortably replaced with today because we're in the 21st century. Alarming rates can be replaced with dangerous rates. Sea levels can be replaced with water levels. And I left continue the way it is. We can use it like that. You don't necessarily need to replace every single word with their synonyms. And mind you, you might not even need some of these synonyms. And as you write, you're going to remember other synonyms which you can comfortably make use of. The instruction words remain the same as usual. You don't need this inside the body of your essay. So they are just a guide as to what type of essay you need to write, be there opinion essays, discussion essays, and the likes. Now let's write our introduction. Remember I said earlier, the any good essay contains four parts: the introduction, two main body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Any good introduction is supposed to contain a paraphrase of the topic. The topic here is the question, a thesis statement, and an outline statement. Now, what are these three elements of the introduction itself? The paraphrase of the topic is simply a sentence that rewrites the essay question in other words without changing the entire meaning of the question. The thesis statement tells the examiner your opinion regarding what the question asked of you. If the question asks for your opinion, that is where you're going to state it in the thesis statement. But if the question does not ask about your opinion, it therefore means that that particular essay you are writing does not need a thesis statement. The outline statement is simply a statement that tells the examiner how you plan to structure your essay, what you plan to write first, what you plan to write second. For instance, this is a problems and solutions essay. Our outline statement is going to read something like, in this essay, or this essay would first discuss dash 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 and dash 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 as problems that are caused by flooding before discussing dash 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 and dash 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 as solutions to those problems. So you see how an outline statement is supposed to read. Now, let me give you a recap of what I said. I said a good introduction is supposed to have three parts: the paraphrase of the question, a thesis statement, and an outline statement. I went further to say that the thesis statement is not always necessary because most essays do not request for your opinion. They just request for you to write. Like in this case, they want you to write about the problems and solutions. Your opinions are not needed as to whether the problems outweigh the solutions or the problems are less important compared to the solutions. Just write about the problems and solutions. That is what makes this essay to not need a thesis statement. You only need a paraphrase and an outline statement. So let's paraphrase the topic. So on the left here, we have the synonyms of our question analysis, which is what we just did in the previous slide. On the top here, we have the question, and on the right, we have what the paraphrased question looks like, making use of these synonyms we got from our question analysis. So now you see how everything is coming together to make an essay. So instead of global warming is one of the biggest threats humans face in the 21st century and sea levels continue to rise at alarming rates, what problems are associated with this and what are some possible solutions? Instead of writing all of this the way it is, remember what we are paraphrasing is this first part. We don't need to paraphrase the instruction words. So we're paraphrasing the main part of the question. So how do we write that global warming is one of the biggest threats humans face in the 21st century and sea levels continue to rise at alarming rates? Pause this video, try and make use of these synonyms to rewrite this essay before playing and compare what you have with what I have. It might not necessarily be the same, but English is complex and there are different ways you can write the same thing correctly. So do that and before playing the video. So this is what we have. One of the major threats humans face today is an increase in Earth's temperature, which is causing ocean waters to rise at very dangerous rates. So you can see how I placed some words here in red. These words here in red represents the original words that have been replaced with the synonyms. So instead of saying biggest threats, I replace that with major threats. Instead of saying in 21st century, I replace that with today. Instead of saying global warming, I say increase in the earth temperature. So you can see how everything, all these words we wrote here are coming together to change the way this message has been passed without changing the message itself. That which is what paraphrasing is, which is causing ocean waters to rise at very dangerous rates. Ocean waters here I used it to replace sea levels, and I used dangerous rates to replace alarming rates. So you've seen why the question analysis is important and how we've made use of it to write a good paraphrase to begin our introduction. Over to the next thing. Like I said earlier, the thesis statement for problems and solutions essays, this is not needed because you are not asked for your opinion. The instruction words are what problems are associated with this and what are the possible solutions. They are not asking you for your opinion. They're asking you for problems and solutions. The outline statement, this follows immediately after the paraphrase topic. I said that earlier. It tells the examiner how you intend to structure your essay to ensure coherence. In this essay type, the thesis will explore two problems and two solutions as instructed. Now you might wonder where in the question were we instructed to write two problems and two solutions. If you remember what the instruction words are, the instruction words are what problems are associated with this, and what are some possible solutions. If the instruction came as what problem is associated with this and what is the solution to this problem, you would know that you'd be safe if you write just one problem and one solution. But it clearly states what problems And what solutions? That means you need what more than one problem and one solution. Two problems and two solutions perfectly qualifies as problems. But if you just list one problem and one solution, it doesn't qualify as problems. It's singular. So try as much as you can to make use of two problems or to give two problems and two solutions should you be faced with this kind of essay in the exam. So this is the result of the coffee shop method, which is what we use to generate ideas. I brought it here because it is from the answer we gave that we are going to use to write our outline. Remember, I said the outline is simply is a sentence or a group of sentences in the introduction that tells the examiner how you plan to structure your essay. Are you going to start discussing the problems first in the main body paragraph one, or are you going to start discussing the solutions in the main body paragraph one? But in this type of essays, I think the logical thing to do is to discuss the problems before you discuss the solutions. That is what I like to do. But you might decide to do otherwise. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be scored down because you discussed problems before solutions or vice versa. Now, the outline is this essay will first discuss how this trend, what trend, the trend of flooding, which is caused by global warming, or sorry, the trend of global warming, how this trend causes severe flooding that destroys people's homes and increases health crisis, before suggesting the construction of strong seawalls and the adoption of renewable energy as highly effective solutions. So you've seen how I've been able to put this answer I gave in form of a single sentence. Home destruction and sicknesses were properly captured in this phrase destroys people's homes and increases health crisis, whilst dams and renewable energy were comprehensively captured in this phrase, suggesting the construction of strong seawalls. Strong seawalls here refers to dams and adoption of renewable energy as highly effective solutions. So you've seen how what we did in the coffee shop method, which is the idea generation stage, has played a very important role in helping us write out a good introduction. Now, let's read the introduction together. This is the introduction, the whole introduction. On the left, we have the question. On the right, we have the introduction's three parts. Remember, I said the thesis is not needed because they didn't ask us for our opinion. So let's read it together, try to make sense of it, and then write something of your own on this topic. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same problems and solutions that I cited. You could do something else, but try to write an essay as you watch this video. That is the fastest way to learn. You're not going to learn by watching 100 videos. You only learn by watching and doing. So pause this video, go over what we've discussed so far, and try to write something of your own on this topic. After writing your introduction, what should come next is your first main body paragraph, and after that, your second main body paragraph before writing the conclusion. So, what is the main body paragraph? The main body paragraph is what talks about a part of the points that you listed or you made mention of in your introduction. And any good main body paragraph should have at least four sentences that will talk about the points of that paragraph. That is to say, what exactly the paragraph is going to talk about. The paragraph will explain that point, will give an example to support that point, and then with a final sentence that summarizes all that has been said in that paragraph, or a sentence that links all that has been said in that paragraph to the introduction. That is seemingly trying to show a relationship of that paragraph to what was said in the introduction. So this translates to what I call the PEEL structure, which is an acronym, which is spelled PEEL, an acronym for point, explain, example, and the link. Let's put it into use in writing our main body paragraph one. So on the left here, we have the introduction, and on the right, we have the main body paragraph one. Why this is important is because, like I said earlier, a good introduction serves as a foundation for the rest of your essay. So that means we are going to be deriving context from what we wrote in our introduction to structure the rest of our essay. Our main body paragraph one is going to talk about the two problems we listed in the outline statements. That is problem one and problem two. While our main body paragraph two will talk about solution one and solution two. And then the conclusion would be a conclusion of all that has been said and a paraphrase of the thesis statement. But in this case, there's no thesis statement. So the solution is simply going to be a restatement or a paraphrase of the problems and solutions that have been discussed in the essay. So let's look at what the main body paragraph one. How are we going to state in the first sentence or first two sentences? How are we going to state the problems we identified in the introduction, which include destruction of homes and increase in health challenges as problems that are caused by flooding? So let's read it off here. The main problems caused by higher sea levels is the constant flooding of coastal towns and the health challenges of homelessness. So you've seen in a single sentence, we've been able to state the two problems that are caused by flooding. So that is what you should aim to do in your essay. The two things you stated as problems, try to fix them in the first sentence of your main body paragraph. The second sentence will be a sentence that explains the first problem. The third sentence will be a sentence that explains the second problem. The fourth sentence will be a sentence that explains any one of the two problems. Take note of that. You're explaining any one of the two problems. You don't need to explain the two problems because you don't have the time for that. So you explain any one of the two problems, and then the link is finally a summary of all that has been said or something that links all you've discussed in that paragraph to the introduction. Let's read it here. The main problems caused by higher sea levels is the constant flooding of coastal towns and the health challenges of homelessness. How do we explain the constant flooding of coastal towns as a problem? When temperature rises, water bodies overflow their banks as a result of the melting of ice in oceans. This flooding leads to the damage of houses and one-time homeowners becoming destitute. So we've said that rising water levels leads to flooding, which destroys people's homes and makes people what destitute. We've completely cited what we said about flooding and homelessness. So what we said about flooding. So now let's talk about how this flooding causes health challenges, which we're going to explain in point two. Furthermore, see how I started by saying furthermore, that's also called signposting. Now, when you're talking about similar things, now these are problems we have grouped together in a single paragraph. So it's safe to call them similar things. You're discussing similar things. You finish discussing one, you want to move to the other one. It's safe to use the word furthermore. Kind of links the two ideas to show that you understand what you're writing and there's progression in what you're writing. So, furthermore, when people are rendered homeless, they become prone to sickness because of exposure to harsh environmental conditions. So, you see how the points are flowing into one another. We say flooding causes people to lose their homes. And then now we are saying that when people lose their homes, they become homeless. And when people are homeless, they fall sick. An example of, like I said, you give an example to support any one of the problems you discussed. You don't need to give an example to support both problems. So I started, for example, you could start with for instance or to illustrate. For example, in Kogi State, Nigeria, the hardship is unparalleled by any neighboring state and it is traceable to the consistent flood events. So I give a simple example from real events. In the previous essay, some of the examples I gave were fabricated, and you saw how we went about doing that. What's the link here? Therefore, the destruction of safe living spaces is a terrible consequence of climate change. What we did here is we linked these problems to the introduction instead of just a mere summary. We say that these consequences, which include flooding of homes and sicknesses as a result of homelessness, are consequences of climate change, which is what we started discussing from the introduction, which is what the question also asked of us. So you've seen how to structure your main body paragraph. Over to main body paragraph 2. This is the work we've been doing so far, the introduction and the main body paragraph. Pause it, read it, try to make more sense of it, and write something of your own. So that's the surest way of learning. You don't learn by just watching. Try to write something of your own before playing the video and watching the rest of it. The main body paragraph 2, it follows a similar pattern. I said we are going to be discussing the two solutions. Remember, the main body paragraph 1 was dedicated to discussing the two problems. Now, what we have to do is discuss the two solutions. And as usual, we're going to make use of the PEEL structure. PEEL, point, explain, example, and the link. What's the points here, or what are the points in this case? The points in this case include the two solutions we gave in the introduction, which is what we have on the left here, the outline part of the introduction. And what are these solutions? Construction of strong seawalls and the adoption of renewable energy as highly effective solutions. So we'll find a way to rephrase these two solutions in a single sentence or two sentences, and that will serve as the point for the beginning of this main body paragraph too. So how do we paraphrase the construction of strong seawalls and adoption of renewable energy as effective solutions to the problems we discussed in main body paragraph 1? How do we put those two things in either a single sentence or two sentences that will represent the point in the main body paragraph 2? So let's read that off main body paragraph 2. Highly practical ways to solve these issues include the construction of strong physical barriers, such as seawalls, and a transition to renewable energy usage. You can see this is a simple sentence, and in that single sentence, we've been able to capture both solutions we offered in the outline portion of our introduction, which is what we have here on the left. How do we now explain each of those points? We'll start by explaining the points in the order that they were given in the point statement, that is this beginning sentence. So you explain the first point, which is the construction of strong physical barriers like retaining walls. In an attempt to explain that, this is what I wrote. If city planners construct dams along the coastline, they can physically block the rising ocean water from entering areas where people live. By doing this, coastline residents can be sure of their safety. Secondly, a major driver of increasing water levels is the use of fossil fuels. Look at how I started explaining the second solution to the problem, which I gave to be the use of renewable energy. So I said, secondly, signposting, telling the examiner that I'm done with explaining the first solution. I I made mention of, now I'm about explaining the second solution. So secondly, a major driver of increasing water levels is the use of fossil fuels. If renewable energy is widely adopted, global warming will be stopped. An example, in giving an example, you don't need to give an example for both points, just like we did in the explanation part. You only need to pick one of the points you're comfortable with and give an example for it. So, for instance, again, this is how to signpost when you're writing an example. For instance, or for example, or to illustrate, some parts of Europe are said to have the purest air because of their wide adoption of solar energy. Now, this is a made up example, but it's possible. So you're not going to be penalized for making example once again. I didn't give a link here because the paragraph is quite long and all that has been said is enough to drive home your points. So like I said earlier, the link is not always necessary. And if you think you'd rather leave your essay the way it is after writing the points, giving an explanation and an example, you better just leave it that way instead of spending more time thinking of a link where it would most times not be necessary. But if you have something to write here, by all means write it. You could think of something that summarizes what we've said in this paragraph or links what we've said in this paragraph to any portion of the introduction. Now, this is the work we've been doing so far. Take your time, go over it, and try to replicate what we've done using your own words, or you could pick another essay topic and follow through with what we did in this video and write something on that essay topic. Over to the conclusion. Conclusions are used for summarizing the problems and solutions you just wrote in the essay. New points should never be introduced here. We recommend a one or two sentence structure for conclusions, a paraphrase of the discussed problems, and a presentation of your points as solutions. So as simple as that. Just paraphrase both the problems and the solutions. And a simple way to do that is to do that in one or two sentences that will present the problems in other words, and then present your solutions. The solutions you give as solutions to the problems in other words also. So let's see how we did that here. So on the left, we have the introduction, and on the right, we have the conclusion. I brought over the introduction because the conclusion is going to be based off of what we wrote in the outline statement, which contains both problems and solutions that we gave. So in conclusion, since the rapid rise of ocean waters causes flooding and health issues that easily disrupts life in coastline communities, associated governments should invest in dams and renewable energy sources for power. So you've seen in this single sentence, we've been able to incorporate both the two problems we we mentioned, and we've been able to also present the two solutions we listed as solutions to those problems. So it's as easy as that. It might not be easy now, but with consistent practice and practicing with different types of topics, you definitely understand this better and do it with more ease than you would if you didn't prepare. So thank you for being here. This is the whole essay. As always, pause the video, go over it, reproduce the essay, and that is the best way to learn. Thank you very much for watching this video. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That encourages me to produce more videos like this. And also drop your questions in the comments if you have any, and be sure that I'll respond to them.